Tonight, for the fourth night in a row, protesters have taken to the streets here in Atlanta, marching from Woodruff Park through downtown, all in response to the police shooting deaths of 2 black men in Louisiana and Minnesota. Meanwhile, at the same time, in Centennial Olympic Park, speakers there addressed another large crowd of demonstrators. We've got full team coverage tonight of both rallies and that march through the streets. We'll begin tonight with our Ryan Kruger, who started out tonight at Woodruff Park before protesters went on the move, and who is now covering that march as it snakes through downtown. Ryan?
Yeah, Blaine, we left Woodruff Park, it seems like ages ago. The rally started at 7, and it was about 8 o'clock that everyone started going on the move. And we made about 5 trips around the city. It seems like the crowd is just walking in circles for the most part. So right now, you may notice by kind of looking at some of the landmarks, we are on Peachtree Street, approaching Andrew Young International, and obviously closing down the road, as you can see. What's been interesting about this night is, the protesters will come to an intersection, and sometimes they'll just stop and demonstrate there for a while. And sometimes they kind of discuss amongst themselves, okay, well, what's our next step? And that happened a handful of times. So keeping up them, was a little difficult because they weren't necessarily following any path. It's really just been kind of intermittent, going in different directions at different times. It has been interesting seeing some of the reactions from people on the street. Here we go. We're going to see some of them right here at the Hard Rock Cafe. We'll show some of them. These are people who are out having dinner on Sunday night, who are coming out, not necessarily to join, although I have seen that, but for the most part, they're coming out to take pictures, to show their support. And it's been interesting to see with some of the motorists. Some of the motorists obviously are upset because they're trying to get to wherever it is they're trying to go, but then a lot are joining in. A lot of times they'll just come out, they'll start revving that horn, they'll start showing their support. Some of them even have signs, so maybe they knew about the protest and wanted to stop by. So that has been the night so far. It has been peaceful, certainly a lot of chants. No arrests that I've seen. Now APD and Georgia State Patrol, they've both kept away. I mean, they're certainly here. They're closing down streets intermittently. A lot of that is to help traffic, so that way other people don't get caught. You can see right here we have a marching band that's been here. This is definitely a very festive, very loud group that's out here today.
Now, Ryan,
so
I see.
The scene here. We're going to be walking. Go ahead.
I was going to say, as you get closer to the drums, it's a little harder to hear you, but I know that you were talking about traffic and the impact on traffic. I wonder if you can talk a bit more about that. I see you in the crowd. You're snaking up Peachtree right in the heart of downtown, typically a busy area right now. Can you talk about the effect that it's having on traffic, any ripple effects? And does it appear that APD will be clearing the streets anytime soon to get traffic moving again?
Yeah, well, they're definitely not clearing the protesters, that's for sure. At least not for now. They are letting the protesters, similar to Friday night, they are letting them demonstrate, letting them do their thing. Here we go. We are approaching, this is a perfect example for you. We are approaching Peachtree in Portland. Tyson, we'll go ahead and stop and show the traffic over here. Now you'll see, yeah, this is absolutely causing an issue with traffic. And, it appears right now the protesters are actually going to stop. And this has been happening intermittently night, where they'll stop at a certain intersection. So Peachtree, John Portman, certainly a busy one. Not tremendously busy, obviously, at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, but still people trying to get to where they're trying to go. And they'll close down the streets. Now, what you were asking about what APD is doing as far as traffic, they are staying a few blocks away, usually. They're trying to stay ahead of them, trying to make sure that too many people don't get jammed up in this traffic jam. But, inevitably, there's only so much that they can do because there's no real direct route. They're just kind of going where they go.
Now, Ryan, I know that you have been covering these rallies for at least a couple of nights now, and you and I were talking before you left for this one about the rhetoric that you'd been kind of seeing and hearing throughout these protests. We've been calling them nonviolent in terms of actions, but can you talk about the rhetoric, just kind of what you've been seeing and reading from signs and chants out there?
Yeah, very feisty rhetoric, that's for sure. There were some speakers that got up and they talked about what to do in case of arrests. And, they're referring to police as pigs, and they say if you see a pig, you need to start taking video of them because they're going to arrest you. Certainly very violent, very fiery rhetoric towards law enforcement, towards police. That has been really the difference between these two rallies, whereas, and we're going to have a live report, but certainly at the rally that was at Centennial Park tonight, that was more of your business crowd. That was your crowd that was there to demonstrate, whereas this was the crowd that really wanted to make their voices heard.
All right. Ryan Kruger live for us tonight in downtown Atlanta, snaking his way through downtown Atlanta, covering those protests live. Started tonight at Woodruff Park and now on Peachtree, and still moving, and have been moving it now for the past couple of hours. Ryan, thank you so much. I know we'll check back with you throughout the night as this continues. Now, of course, as Ryan mentioned, you heard him just now, the night started much calmer at Centennial Olympic Park. A number of speakers there addressing a rather large crowd consisting in part of law students. Our Joe Henke is covering that part of the story for us tonight. And Joe, we know that organizers say they expected some 1,500 people. I know when I spoke with you recently, you said there were still a couple hundred people there at the park. How large was that crowd tonight at Centennial Olympic Park?
Well, that large number of, it was around 1,300 I saw on Facebook. That was their estimate for tonight based off of people, I guess, RSVP'd, you could say, through Facebook. But only about several hundred, maybe 400 showed up to the event here tonight. And then that group that was left here, they all went in separate directions. It appeared that they were just going home for the evening around 9:30. But when this event started around 7 o'clock, those speakers turned the steps leading into the park here behind me into a stage for the night. Several speakers stood there and addressed that crowd of several hundred, and all of those speakers, even though they delivered a unique message, they kept hitting on some similar points as they addressed the crowd. Now, several of the speakers told the people in attendance here, too many people complain or post their opinions on social media, but then never take any action such as voting to create a real change. Other speakers talked about breaking a cycle they see too often. One young woman, just before tonight's rally began, talked to me about what she sees as a cycle of protests and rallies, then deadly shootings, followed by just more protests and rallies.
The cycle is we come and we march, and then another thing like this happens again, and then we come and we march. We got to break that.
This rally here is more of the healing process, talking about and strategizing on how we move forward, right? So we did the protest, we did that for the last 2 or 3 days. Now it's how do we heal, how do we mend and move forward.
And that second gentleman that you heard from there, he was one of the speakers at tonight's event. His message that he just said right there is one that was echoed by several of the other speakers on stage tonight of looking for solutions to problems, to mend or fix some of the problems that people are facing or complaining about or discussing in tonight's rally or the protests we've seen over the last couple days. Now, as the speakers wrapped up, all of the people in attendance here then began marching around Centennial Park. It was much different than what we've seen in the past several nights, though. It was a very short march just around the park. Then they went back into the park where there was some more chanting, some more dialogue before Blaine. Like I said, everyone just appeared to sort of go their separate ways as they went home for the evening.
Joe, certainly a much different scene there at Centennial Olympic Park from what we saw just a few minutes ago in Ryan's live shot. But I want to ask you a sort of a similar question. Can you talk about the rhetoric? What did you hear in tonight's rally in terms of rhetoric, signs, just words that were being said? Kind of talk about the tone of tonight's rally.
Well, some of the rhetoric that we heard is similar to what I was hearing last night at protests there. No justice, no peace is something that they were chanting quite a bit. There were quite a few lawyers that are very prominent in the black community in Atlanta that spoke here tonight. There was a lot of words spoke about finding legal representation or getting involved in the legal process, such as if you're called for jury duty, take that seriously and make sure that that is something that people actually show up to do and don't look for ways to get out of as one way to have an impact. Also, there was a lot of rhetoric about the voting process of registering people to vote and make sure that you show up not just for national elections but also local elections, which, as we know, has an impact on who our judges are and our state representatives.
Both rallies certainly calling for action, but in very different ways. Joe Henke live tonight at Centennial Olympic Park. Thank you so much. Well, ahead of tonight's planned protests and rallies, Atlanta police sat down with Ambassador Andrew Young earlier today. Now, the group discussed police shootings all across the country, and the former Atlanta mayor gave his perspective on past violent police encounters here in our city. He also acknowledged that nearly every interaction between officers and the public can be seen as a life or death situation, but he stressed the need for officers to maintain control of that situation and control of their own emotions.
I think what we've almost proved is that being friendly and being respectful and keeping the situation under your control and not letting anybody get you upset has been the thing that seems to work best for us.
Ambassador Young commended the officers for respecting the demonstrators during local protesters and for not showing up in riot gear and for avoiding conflict. Meanwhile, President Barack Obama will travel to Dallas on Tuesday and deliver remarks at an interfaith memorial service. The White House says the president is making the trip at the invitation of the mayor of the city of Dallas. 5 officers were killed there, 7 others wounded after a gunman opened fire on a protest march Thursday night. Now, Black Lives Matter leader Derek A. McKesson was released from jail after his arrest last night at that Baton Rouge protest. McKesson was one of more than 100 demonstrators taken into custody. The 31-year-old activist traveled from Baltimore to protest the deadly shooting of Alton Sterling outside of a convenience store. Today, McKesson said that he was disappointed in the Baton Rouge Police Department.
There's a lot of work to be done with this police department specifically. The only people that were violent last night were the Baton Rouge Police Department. The protesters remain peaceful both here and across the country. Again, I remain deeply disappointed in the Baton Rouge Police Department, and I'm hopeful that the Department of Justice intervenes both in the death of Alton and with the way that they treat protesters.
McKesson said that he was charged for obstructing a highway. A former Teach for America educator and school administrator, McKesson ran for mayor of Baltimore this year but did not win. Well, turning now to other news here in Atlanta, the Atlanta police officer at the center of a fatal shooting in Midtown last month has been dismissed by Chief George Turner. That officer shot and killed 22-year-old Deravis Rogers on June 22nd on Monroe Place. Investigators said that Rogers was suspected of breaking into a car at a nearby apartment complex and leading police on a chase. Tonight, an APD spokesperson said that after an internal investigation, it was determined that the officer used unnecessary and unreasonable force by shooting into that car. The GBI is continuing to investigate the shooting, and APD plans to release the officer's name tomorrow. Well, right now we are taking a live look of those protesters outside as we go to break. Still marching around downtown Atlanta now, going on 2.5 hours. Our Ryan Kruger is there on the ground covering them each step of the way. We will continue to hear from him and our other reporters on the scene throughout the evening. We'll be right back.